was like dynamite for 3-4 times. Believe it or not, I scared like hell.
We have taken a number of steps already to deal with the risks and the threats of gun violence.
From a Bridle Path mansion to a Finch West club, Toronto has rarely seen such a violent weekend. It's left many people asking, how do we stop the shootings? Over 3 days, there were 14 shooting incidents, according to Toronto police. The violence started Saturday with a shooting near Dufferin and Lawrence. 2 people were shot there. Then things ramped up for the last 2 days of the long weekend. Shootings all around the city, from the Bridle Path to Liberty Village, Etobicoke to Scarborough. By the end of Monday night, 17 people had been shot in Toronto. The number of shootings is shocking. Incredibly, no one was killed in any of them. That cannot be said for the Jane and Falstaff community, where a 16-year-old was shot and killed in a stairwell there last Thursday. Chris Glover joins us live from that community now. And Chris, tonight, a meeting is being held there to address solutions.
More than a dozen shootings happened over the course of this weekend, and yet there have been no arrests. The mayor calls this gun violence heartbreaking and frustrating, and once again, there is a cry for solutions. A man was shot overnight outside this Toronto community housing building in the city's East End.
It wasn't like a gunshot, it was like dynamite for 3-4 times.
Neighbors still reeling from a weekend with more than a dozen separate shootings.
Who you can blame, the police or who? The police they do their best anyway, but what can they do?
Despite mountains of evidence, like this new video captured during the shooting at the District 45 Club yesterday morning in North York, no arrests yet.
I find this one very bothersome.
The chief of police is fed up.
We think this one is very solvable. There were a lot of people that were there, and some people, no doubt, are afraid. We will be putting additional resources in specific places.
But even the posh Bridle Path neighborhood dealt with a shooting this weekend, and the chief won't say where extra officers are going.
It's a sort of controlled chaos.
At trauma centers like Toronto's St. Mike's, doctors dealing with the casualties are now lobbying for a ban on semi-automatic and assault rifles.
The majority of the economically developed nations of the world have acted on this evidence and put strict controls on civilian access to certain kinds of guns. And we ask our government to do the same.
Mayors from Toronto to Montreal are calling for a handgun ban.
If we have a choice of doing absolutely everything that we possibly can in order to stem this tide of gun violence, then I do believe that a handgun ban would make some difference.
But today, as the Liberals gear up for re-election, the public safety minister would only say a gun violence strategy is coming.
We are examining our own circumstances. We're observing, obviously, what other countries have done or not done.
This criminologist points out many guns used in shootings in Toronto are illegally smuggled in.
Controlling what's happening domestically is a starting point, but it's not a panacea, particularly when the United States is just a couple hours down the road.
He says gun violence stems from systemic poverty, and that's what authorities need to stop first. And as for these active investigations, the chief of police says at this point they aren't connecting them. But another concern about this weekend was the number of festivals and events that were going on in Toronto and how many people were coming into the country from perhaps the U.S. But at this point, the chief of police isn't able to say how many of the victims or potential suspects are locals or tourists. Still, it is causing a lot of concern for people in this city, and that's one of the reasons why you have a community meeting like the one behind me, where there will be Toronto police, city officials, as well as Toronto community housing officials. And I'm going to be speaking with the head of TCH coming up at 6:30. We'll have that interview for you, and we'll put some of these questions about what TCH can do to try to prevent this kind of violence that is, in the 2 most recent cases, happening right in their parking lots. Dwight?
Okay, Chris, we will check back with you later. Now, some see tougher sentences for gun crimes as a solution, and today's sentencing began for the man found guilty in one of Toronto's most public shootings. Christopher Husbands was convicted of 2 counts of manslaughter in the Eaton Centre shooting of 2012. Ali Chiasson is live at the courthouse for us tonight. And Ali, you heard victim impact statements from some of the people shot that day and from some of the people who witnessed what happened.
That's right, and they each described their life sentence of dealing with panic attacks, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder since this shooting incident. They wanted Christopher Husbands to see and hear how their lives have changed, and they wanted the judge to get a sense of that as well. It's been 7 years since Christopher Husbands ran up on two men in the Eaton Centre food court. Firing 14 times. He killed his childhood friend Nixon Nirmalendran and an acquaintance, Ahmed Hassan. Husbands wounded 5 others in the spray of bullets. Today, we heard from some of those people caught in the gunfire.
They focused on that split second.
Like Craig Stevenson, who vividly described with pictures his son Connor's injuries, looking Husbands in the eye.
I didn't see any remorse. He was pretty bland. He sat there and looked at the pictures, and then looked away, looked at me, looked at the pictures, and then looked away. And it didn't look like there was any remorse.
Christopher Husbands was convicted of manslaughter, not murder. In February, his defense team successfully argued their client had PTSD and snapped that day in June 2012 after recognizing his attackers from when he was jumped and stabbed earlier that year. They convinced the jury the killings played out like a misguided type of street justice.
This is not supposed to be a defense for a gang shooting. I mean, I hope that something different comes out of this. I hope that at least the maximum sentence is given or another trial to really set the tone for this is not allowed in this city.
The mandatory minimum for a manslaughter conviction is 4 years. Husbands would likely get credit having served the last 7 years already in custody, something that chills Connor, who is lucky to be standing here today.
I think what changed my life most is actually seeing how this trial process has gone. I mean, I thought I lived in Canada, I thought we had a system where people who murdered people in the middle of a mall on camera would go to jail for it and not be out in 7 or 10 years.
The Crown is arguing for the max, life in prison, or at the very least, the maximum for 5 lesser charges of aggravated assault. And for Connor's injuries, criminal negligence causing bodily harm to tack on more years. There was some real drama in that courtroom today. Craig Stevenson actually mimicked the sound of the gunshot, saying bang so loud that it echoed in the court chambers. That was his way of giving us a sense of how scary it was to be there. This sentencing hearing is expected to drag on for the next several weeks. There are still submissions to be heard and experts to be heard from as well. This is a case that has already carried on for 7 years. This judge has a big decision to make when it comes down to handing down his sentence. I'll send it back to you.
It was a terrifying day in that Eaton Centre food court. Thank you for that, Ali. The U.S. dealing with the personal and political effects of its own gun violence today after 2 mass shootings over the weekend left more than 30 people dead in Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas. President Donald Trump is set to visit both tomorrow, meeting with victims, families, and survivors. Kim Brunhuber is in El Paso and has more on how Trump's trip to that city could be received.
President Trump is expected to get a mixed reaction here in El Paso. Here's why. Racially, the city is about 80% Hispanic. Politically, it's a Democratic island in a Republican sea. And geographically, this is very close to the border. It's only about 8 kilometers away from the city of Juarez. So there are lots of connections with the nation of Mexico. This is one of the busiest border crossings in the country. It's also one of the busiest illegal border crossings, and that's why El Paso has become the center of the immigration debate. I was here a couple of months ago covering the story of the migrants who were being held in essentially a cage outside, and that was being used as an example by the Trump administration of a broken immigration system and how the country was being overrun. And so you can see why Democratic politicians here in El Paso have been quick to draw the line between President Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric and the tragic events that happen here. Many of them are saying Trump will not be welcome here, and perhaps loudest among those voices has been former El Paso Congressman, now Democratic candidate for president, Beto O'Rourke.
I was just talking to somebody, listening to a woman who came up and said hello to me, and she said, "Why is he coming here when he hates us?" She's reflecting the fact that he described Mexican immigrants. This is a town of Mexican immigrants, as rapists and criminals, repeatedly has warned of an invasion, trying to make us afraid of those who do not look like the majority of this country.
As for the residents themselves, there's been surprisingly little anger at the idea of President Trump's visit. Not one person I spoke to blamed President Trump either directly or indirectly for the events that happened here. I don't think he will be welcomed universally with open arms, but many here say that because the community is still healing, now's the time for unity, not division.
There's really no room for anger right now. Just love for the people that lost their lives here and come and embrace them as a community, as a family.
The anger, he says, will come later. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, El Paso, Texas.
We must do something. And that is exactly what we are going to do.
After the mass shooting in Ohio over the weekend, politicians are calling on legislators to pass laws to prevent gun violence. We'll bring you some of those measures a little later in the show. Now to developing news on the search for 2 BC murder suspects. The RCMP today announced they have found several items linked to the 2 men. The items, which have not been named, were discovered Friday along the shoreline of the Nelson River near Gillam, Manitoba. A damaged boat was also found along the shoreline that day. These discoveries prompted the RCMP to search the river over the weekend. It's near where Briar Schmagelski and Cam McLeod were last seen. The pair are wanted in the murders of 3 people last month in northern BC. They were last spotted in the area 2 weeks ago, but there haven't been any confirmed sightings since. A Collingwood woman wants to know where one of her horses is after 2 of them were allegedly stolen. Rachel Baker rented them to a Peterborough woman last year, but as Kelda Ewan tells us, after the lease expired, her horses disappeared.
Oh, boy. It was an emotional reunion for Rachel Baker and her 13-year-old horse, Action.
The words kind of can't describe it.
But getting to this point wasn't easy. She says she had to sell her truck to buy him back 2 months ago, and she still hasn't found her other horse, Olivia. The ordeal began in early 2018 when Baker leased out both horses to a woman named Janice Hollett-Taylor, seen here riding Olivia. In the rental contract, Hollett-Taylor states the horses would be used for pleasure, competition, and training.
It's very normal in the industry.
At first, Baker says she received updates, but then...
Basically, she just fell off the radar and she never contacted me back.
After the lease was up, she went to Hollett-Taylor's farm with police, but the horses were nowhere to be found. She did some digging and eventually tracked down Action online. By then, he had been sold twice.
And that's how fast these horses can go missing and go through all these different auctions.
Baker isn't the only one who feels betrayed. Dylan Cowles is a childhood friend of Hollett-Taylor. He says he spent $20,000 to take care of Action and Olivia after Hollett-Taylor offered to make him an owner. He says she told him they were rescues.
I was like, free horses, no big deal there. Just have to pay for their bills and everything.
Cowles says he stopped paying when she wouldn't give him receipts. Shortly after, he says she blocked him from contacting her, claiming the horses were hers.
I felt really bad. I felt taken advantage of.
Baker brought OPP evidence that her horses were in fact stolen. Hollett-Taylor and her husband are now both facing fraud, theft, as well as animal cruelty-related charges. She has not responded to our multiple requests for comment. Baker, meanwhile, wants more to be done to regulate the sale of horses.
He was stolen. They didn't have to provide ownership for his sale, and there's just no accountability.
Gail Ecker, director of Equine Guelph, says sadly having ownership papers is not mandatory.
It would be nice if the laws changed because that would certainly give the horse a lot more protection than what it has right now.
She says the most important thing is to do your homework and get to know the person who's leasing your horse. And while she's overjoyed to have Action back, Baker is still searching for Olivia. And Dylan, he will be visiting Action later this month.
I'm going to bring him a watermelon. It's his favorite thing.
That's a good boy.
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Remember, if you have a story you would like us to look into, we would love to hear from you. Send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca.
It's still only the first round of the Rogers Cup, but plenty of buzz and excitement around here at the Aviva Center, and that's because of this. I'm Greg Ross. Coming up, I'll preview tonight's big all-Canadian matchup on center court.
A wonderful weekend, Colette, and the rain waited until we got back to work.
Yeah, that's the way we like it. So often it's the other way around. We have holiday weekends and we just can't get the weather we want. So very nice. Yeah, we'll take it today. And you know, in terms of this instability we're seeing, we're going to have a couple of days like this, not where it's raining all the time, but where we get into these pockets with some heavier downpours, even the risk of some severe weather. And we've got a few days of that, and then we're just going to see a total change in the pattern. For the moment, we are at 26 degrees, and we're still into this humidity. So the Humidex, 31, feeling like the low 30s. At the peak earlier this afternoon, it actually felt like about 35 in terms of our Humidex. Now, in terms of some of the thunderstorms that we've been seeing, of course, we had some of the heavier downpours earlier in the day that went through the city, but now we do have a severe thunderstorm warning from Environment Canada that's just around through the Hamilton area over towards Niagara Falls. Really, it's around Niagara-on-the-Lake, Grimsby, through that area. I'll show you on the radar. It's this line of storms right here. Look at all those lightning strikes. If I pull those off, you can see some of these cells with, some heavier downpours, and they're moving pretty slowly to the east. Because of that, it allows a lot of rain to come down in that period of time, and before they move off, some small hail, that potential also there. The big picture shows a lot of this is out over the lakes, but there's still some instability, so we could have a little more development into the overnight hours. Early tomorrow morning, we'll likely have some wet spots along the lake shore, so know about that for the morning commute. And then into the afternoon, we'll get back into a few scattered showers and thunderstorms. In between, things shouldn't be too bad, and maybe even some sunshine in there. But 19 overnight tonight, 27 degrees tomorrow afternoon, but still feeling like we're in the 30s. I'll tell you about the cool down coming up, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
An all-Canadian matchup at the Rogers Cup today. Jeannie Bouchard will take on Bianca Andreescu at 7 p.m. Both women could use the win. Coming back from injuries, Greg Ross is live at the Aviva Center for us tonight. And Greg, it's sure to be an exciting match for this Canadian crowd.
Yeah, and they are excited already. It's, lots of people milling into the Aviva Center here. You can feel the buzz. You can feel the excitement, almost like a playoff kind of atmosphere around here as we get set to see these two Canadians square off. And of course, many of the people here very excited to see Andreescu, who was born in Mississauga, not too far away from where we are right now. Lots of her friends and family expected to be on hand for this one tonight. And she had that great start to this season, winning at Indian Wells, her first WTA title. And then, of course, the injury problems, as you mentioned, Dwight, came into play. A shoulder injury that really has kept her out for the better part of this season. She's only played one match in the last 4 months. That was at the French Open. Then we look at Jeannie Bouchard, somebody who really jumped onto the international stage back in 2014, almost an overnight sensation, going to the final at Wimbledon, going to the semifinals at 2 other Grand Slams that same year, and she became internationally known, internationally loved, and of course she'll have a lot of fans here tonight as well to cheer her on for this match, and that's really why so many people are excited, and that's why it's such a hot ticket.
The blockbuster match.
Tournament director Carl Hale says tonight's all-Canadian matchup has created some early buzz for the women's draw at the Rogers Cup.
Bianca's been injured. Jeannie hasn't done well. They both need a win here to get back on track.
And because of that, this is one of the hottest tickets in town. Organizers are expecting a sellout crowd at the Aviva Center.
Two Canadians first round, always going to be a crazy match, awesome for the fans.
It's a huge deal, yeah. Jeannie's got a chance to come back and show her stuff, her talent, and Bianca is just on top of her game.
The excitement even overshadowing some of the other big names who are on the court today, like Venus Williams.
I'm sure it's not easy to play each other in the first round, being from the same country and playing at home. So it should be a competitive match. I mean, Jeannie's been to the finals of Wimbledon, so she has the experience.
In fact, Williams almost shut her press conference down when it seemed like the only questions were going to be about tonight's all-Canadian matchup.
So if you have any questions about me or my match, then let me know now, or else I'll exit stage right.
Unfortunately, one of these two Canadians will also be making an early exit from the tournament. And with the match being played not far from Andreescu's hometown of Mississauga, it's clear who the fans are cheering for. Who's going to be the favorite in this?
I think Bianca, just because she's from Toronto.
Who do you think the crowd's going to be cheering for tonight?
Bianca, I would say, just because she's from Ontario and
local. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's going to be hard not to cheer for Jeannie Bouchard as well. I'm sure it doesn't matter who really is going to win this matchup. They're going to be happy to see a Canadian advance. And we did see two of the big names on that draw board there come off today. Ashley Barty, the #1 seed, lost her opening round match. And also Venus Williams, as we mentioned, she's out of the tournament as well. That was a tough one for her, having to, after lose, step into that press conference room and Dwight answer questions about two Canadians that really have nothing to do with her match here today.
Yeah, I would have liked to see Bianca play Venus. That might have been fun. All right, thank you for that, Greg. Now, the odds of a Canadian first-round matchup aren't exactly high, but despite that, another Canadian duo also squared off on the men's side.
Over 2.5 hours, but the 18-year-old from Montreal prevailed.
Montreal's Felix Auger-Aliassime took the match after a hard-fought battle with Vernon, BC's Vasek Pospisil. The two are friends and competitors. They just played each other at Wimbledon last month, where Auger-Aliassime also came out on top. The pair started the Rogers Cup as doubles partners yesterday, suffering a close loss to a French pair. Auger-Aliassime will face another Canadian tomorrow, Milos Raonic. The world has lost one of its most beloved and celebrated authors. Toni Morrison has died at the age of 88. More on the life and work of the renowned writer coming up after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Toni Morrison, one of America's most beloved writers, has died. Morrison was known for her personal and emotional portraits of characters under pressure. Stephanie Skinderis joins us now. Stephanie, Pulitzer Prize winner, Nobel laureate. We lost an icon.
We did. These iconic books, novels like Beloved, Song of Solomon, Of Mercy, Jazz, there's so many of them. They focused on Black culture and Black lives, and they did it in such a raw and real way. Toni Morrison's publisher says she died last night following a short illness, surrounded by loved ones. She was 88 years old, but she actually came to writing a little bit later in life. When she was 30, she published her first book, The Bluest Eye, when she was 39. And she talked to CBC's The Journal in 1987 about how that happened while she was working as an editor at Random House.
I sat down at the desk one day at Random House when my children were very young, and I felt I couldn't get up from the chair because I didn't know what to do. Literally, I had so many things to do that I was paralyzed. Then I thought, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do a list that says, what do you want to do? What do you have to do? What is it that if you don't do it, you'll die? And then there were two things. Only. One, the first one, was mother my children. And the second one was write books.
Wow.
It's such an incredible and powerful clip, and thank goodness she did write those books, because what a career she had. 11 novels, 5 children's books, 2 plays, a song cycle, an opera, a Pulitzer Prize in 1988 for Beloved, a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993, the first Black woman to win that, the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012. And on the mothering front, well, her family says she was an extremely devoted mother, grandmother, aunt, the consummate writer, they said, who treasured the written word. They said, although her passing represents a tremendous loss, we are grateful she had a long, well-lived life.
Yes, she did. Let's talk now about the impact of her writing on the world of literature and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who read her books felt that impact.
Yes.
I know I did. I read
did too.
Beloved
Yep.
in university. That story is so powerful. But I also think it's important to focus on the impact that she had on Black writers and Black people, because that is really who she was writing for and about. Her writing took this unflinching look at the experience of being Black, particularly in America. She told The New Yorker in 2003, I wanted it to come from inside the culture and speak to people inside the culture. It was about a refusal to pander or distort or gain political points. I wanted to reveal and raise questions. And of course, that came with labels. The label of a Black writer, a Black female writer. And we got a sense of how she felt about that in a clip I can show you. It comes from a recent documentary of her called The Pieces I Am.
You'd sick unto death of being labeled a Black writer.
I prefer it.
Oh, I thought you probably were tired of it.
Well, I'm tired of people asking the question.
Oh yes, of course.
A sense of humor there, but also unapologetic. She told The Guardian in 2015, I thought this was interesting. She said, I'm writing for Black people in the same way that Tolstoy was not writing for me. As she put it, a 14-year-old colored girl from Lorain, Ohio. I don't have to apologize or consider myself limited. And she mentored and opened the door for other writers of color. At Random House, she published works by Black writers. Shonda Rhimes, of course, the celebrated TV and film writer herself, one of the people remembering Toni Morrison today, saying, she made me understand writer was a fine profession and I grew up wanting to be only her. We're getting some other reaction too, notably Oprah, who of course bought the rights to Beloved,
yep.
starred in the movie. Part of what she said, she was our conscience, our seer, our truth teller. She was a magician with language who understood the power of words. She used them to roil us, to wake us, to educate us, and help us grapple with our deepest wounds and try to comprehend them. Oprah described her as the Empress Supreme among writers. We're also hearing from former President Barack Obama. He said Toni Morrison was a national treasure, as good a storyteller, as captivating in person as she was on the page. Her writing was a beautiful, meaningful challenge to our conscience and our moral imagination. What a gift to breathe the same air as her, if only for a while. And I just want to bring this back to Toni Morrison's own words. Her publisher tweeted this quote from her Nobel speech. They said, we die, that may be the meaning of life, but we do language, that may be the measure of our lives.
She's got a great breadth of work for us
Exactly.
to keep reading for a long time to come. She'll be missed. Thank you for this, Stephanie.
Thanks, Dwight.
I don't care about the kitchen no more, just give me my money back. And I'll go somewhere else. Oh, don't worry, I can't give you your money back because I already cut the cutout. I just gotta put it together. I go, every time I talk to you, you give me an excuse, or you give me a line, or you lie to me, you ignore my calls. I need to know what's going on.
It was a dream renovation that turned into this couple's kitchen nightmare. We'll bring you their story a little later in the show. Stay with us, we will be right back. Violence on a scale rarely seen in the city. A spate of shootings over the long weekend, once again putting gun crime in the spotlight. The latest shooting coming last night near Scarborough Golf Club Road in Lawrence East that left one man with non-life-threatening injuries. Police say there have been 14 separate shooting incidents since Saturday, leaving a total of 17 people hurt. and the city searching for answers tonight. In a half an hour, a public meeting will get underway in the North York community to address a recent fatal shooting. Chris Glover joins us live again from the Falstaff Community Center. And Chris, what are we expecting at the meeting tonight?
There are concerns from people who live in this area about security, concerns about their own security and their safety after that boy was killed here just last week. And then also we have this weekend where we know that two people were shot outside of Toronto Community Housing buildings. So there is a spotlight on TCH properties. And I want to bring in now Kevin Marshman, who is the CEO of TCH. And you're going to be in that meeting tonight talking with all of these folks. We've talked a lot about poverty issues and about different things that lead to gun violence in our city and what can be done and as far as a ban on handguns, things like that. But what can the TCH do to try to prevent gun violence like we're seeing in Toronto?
Chris, first I want to offer my deepest condolences to Hanad's family, his friends, and the community at large. This community is suffering, and understandably so. I think, you know, the issue that we are facing with gun violence across the city as a whole requires our community partners and all levels of government to come together and work on a solution. And as the CEO of Toronto Community Housing, I want to ensure that we are doing everything within our power to assist in that shared mission.
And you've already taken some measures to combat the gun violence that we're seeing in Toronto. What steps have you already taken?
Well, for example, in this community, we have already increased security. We continue to upgrade the cameras and add additional cameras across the portfolio. We have nearly 12,000 cameras across the portfolio in the Falstaff community itself. We have about 136 cameras, and we are going to continue to add more security cameras. So we're actually putting, you know, at the roadway access, we are putting license plate cameras in there. We're enhancing the lighting within the building so that we can get better graphics, you know, from the cameras feeds that we get. In addition, we are also effective in September as part of our violence reduction program. We are going to put nighttime CSU officers in the Jane Falstaff corridors, or at 2195 Jane Street and the Falstaff community of buildings. So they will have full-time support in the nighttime hours.
Okay, well, Kevin, thank you very much for this. And I know that there's going to be those steps that have already been taken, but you're looking for some input from citizens and from people who live in this neighborhood to talk about what solutions they might have in all of this as well. So, Dwight, this meeting, as you mentioned, gets underway in a half hour from now, and TCH is here. Toronto Police will also be here, as well as the local councillor, to try to figure out how the city and this neighborhood can try to prevent some of the gun violence that we are seeing.
Yeah. Teenagers lost their lives there just last week. Thank you for that, Chris. One solution to gun violence often put forward by politicians is a handgun ban. It's something the federal government has been mulling over for some time. A report on a possible ban has been delivered to Prime Minister Trudeau, but today, Minister of Public Safety Ralph Goodale was tight-lipped about what it concludes, and it sounds like that answer may not come until election time. Take a listen.
The content of that report and other facts and information, including ongoing events, are shaping the policy proposals that we will be making to Canadians in the weeks immediately ahead. And Canadians will have an opportunity to listen to the competing views of all the political parties, but they'll see a very strong presentation from the government, and Canadians will be able to decide.
New Zealand brought in a ban within a month of the Christchurch shootings. What is the holdup here?
We are taking all relevant factors into account to well, I can't comment on other countries, but I do say that we are examining our own circumstances. We're observing, obviously, what other countries have done or not done, and we are taking our own Canadian decisions, and we're doing so, obviously, on the eve of a very important democratic decision that Canadians will have to take.
Earlier this year, a report commissioned by the federal government found there is mixed support for a handgun ban in Canada. An American politician is moving quickly on gun control after a mass shooting in his state. Ohio's Republican governor is introducing 17 measures designed to reduce gun violence. Karen Pauls has more on the proposed changes.
Because we know that we cannot.
2 days after Ohio Governor Mike DeWine was shouted down at a vigil in Dayton, he made this announcement.
We must do something. And that is exactly what we are going to do.
Among the 17 initiatives, increased background checks for all gun sales in Ohio, although that would include exemptions for the transfer of firearms within families. Safety protection orders, which would allow family members, loved ones, or police to file orders that would take away guns from people who pose a danger and have access to firearms. As well, tougher punishments for people who help others obtain guns, particularly minors, and increased access to state psychiatric hospitals and mental health services.
If we do these things, it will matter. If we do these things, it will make us safer. Each one of these by themselves is not going to solve all the problems. But I believe in my heart that each and every one of them will help.
Dayton's mayor says DeWine's plan could help prevent future tragedies if it gets approved quickly. Nan Whaley also confirms President Trump will visit Dayton tomorrow, and he may get a frosty reception.
His rhetoric has been painful for many in our community, and I think that people should stand up and say they're not happy if they're not happy that he's coming.
Hate has no place in America.
While Trump is condemning racism, hate, and white supremacy, he's not talking about gun control outside of mental illness.
Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun.
Dayton's mayor says so far the federal response to gun violence has not been satisfactory, and she intends to tell the president that in person. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Washington.
A 29-year-old man has died 2 days after he was critically injured in a crash on the 401 near Port Union. A driver hit the back of an empty bus just before 8 a.m. Sunday. The man was airlifted to a trauma center. Police say that speed was a factor, and while the scene was closed for investigation, an impaired driver in another vehicle drove through the scene, almost hitting first responders. The 29-year-old man from Scarborough was taken into custody after being tasered. He's been charged with multiple offenses, including impaired driving and driving with open liquor. An election ask from the Canadian Health Food Association today. They want all political parties to commit to regulating cannabidiol or CBD, an ingredient found in cannabis.
CBD is natural. It comes from hemp and cannabis plants. It is non-psychoactive, non-addictive, and Canadians use it for health and wellness purposes. CBD should be regulated as a natural health product, but unfortunately, current regulations are shutting out the natural health product industry from meeting CBD's market demand in Canada.
Right now, CBD products can only be sold through recreational cannabis stores. The association wants the health and organics industry to also be able to make and sell the products too. CBD is used in pills and creams for things like pain relief or anxiety. The association says regulation would also mean better labeling practices, giving more information on usage and warnings. A Mississauga couple's plan for a dream kitchen has gone up in smoke. They're out thousands of dollars after the contractor they hired to do the job disappeared, and the company he worked for has closed its doors. Nellie Danowski explains.
I wanted actually a pantry right here.
That's how Delia Cole laid out her dream kitchen back in March. 5 months later, nothing, not even a kitchen sink.
I even had my mom from back home coming here, and I had no kitchen, and it's like...
It's very stressful.
Stressful because the contractor she and her husband hired ran off with more than $15,000.
He told us this is how much it cost the kitchen, and if we paid everything up front, we can save 10%. We would have saved $1,000 on the cost.
They paid in 2 installments, $8,000 first, $7,000 a few days later. And the kitchen was supposed to be installed by the end of March.
And then when the week went by, we called him and he says, you have to wait a little bit more, and he kept giving us the runaround.
They say the contractor refused to give them their money back and then stopped picking up their calls. He also didn't return any calls from CBC Toronto.
The customer you have dialed is currently not available.
So we went to Candec Kitchen, the company he worked for.
The Mississauga office appears to be completely shut down. So the door is locked. There's nothing inside. It's been completely cleared out. And on here, there's a notice saying that the tenant didn't pay rent.
The couple called the police and filed a complaint with the Ministry of Government and Customer Services. But there's little else they can do.
We can go to smoke claims court, pay $500, they go subpoena him, but when you subpoena him, he can turn around and claim bankruptcy. He doesn't have to pay us nothing.
Yes.
Now they're going to have to find someone else to finish the job.
It's going to be double the price.
Double the price we thought it was going to be.
They hope that by telling their story, others who were affected by Candec Kitchen closing will come forward. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Mississauga.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX was down by over 122 points. The Dow Jones was up by 311. And the Canadian dollar traded for an average of 75.45 cents US. Stay with us. We'll be right back. So busy playing tourist in my town all weekend for Carnival. Colette, even water the grass this weekend. I'm so happy it rained.
I know. I guess, yeah, we need it. And it is fun to play tourist in your own city. I do that sometimes, too. It's fantastic. I'll tell you, before the holiday weekend, this number, the average high, was up there at about 27 degrees. Then we go through the holiday weekend and see what's happening. Yeah, we've kind of reached our peak for the summer. And then in general, things start to come down a little bit. But you wouldn't necessarily know it, right? I also want to just point out that the record rain for the state in history, holding since 1968, almost 50 millimeters of rain. The other thing is the average overnight low at this time of year is just under 15 degrees. Well, we're trending still above that, so still seeing our sleeping temperatures up to around 19, 20 degrees through the overnight. 26 is our current reading. Earlier, it felt like we were in the mid-30s, so I guess that's an improvement that now feels like the low 30s for our humidex values. And as we know, we've been having some showers and some thunderstorms that have been rolling through the area. Primarily what we'll find is they weaken through the overnight hours, but then just a few spotty showers tomorrow morning possible along the shoreline, and then tomorrow afternoon we could see a few popping up again. So there might be the odd thunderstorm or a shower, but most places are going to stay dry. And in between, we should get into some sunshine, more clouds in the morning, but getting into a bit of a mix of sun and cloud. The next system is going to come through the next cold front into Thursday. That's going to bring some instability, especially in the afternoon and early evening. Once that one goes through, things really change. We're going to find the humidity dropping off, but we'll get into some nice weather for Friday and into the weekend. Overnight tonight, though, there it is, those temperatures above seasonal. A few spotty showers still possible. And, of course, we had the more active weather I was showing earlier in the show from Hamilton around towards the St. Catharines area and some of those warning areas. Tomorrow afternoon, a few spots could see some showers, but otherwise, so have the umbrella. It's 27, feeling like 33. Breezy on Thursday till that front goes through. And then we get into that drier spell and lots of sunshine from Friday through next weekend. You'll need to water the grass, right?
Yes, but the weekend looking good again. Thanks, Colette.
You got it.
We do know that there are a lot of errors or mistakes or just things that could make the seats safer.
They are used to protect children, but only if they're properly installed. That is an issue that's driving a new study at Sick Kids. We'll bring you the details after the break. Nick Nurse is back coaching basketball in our city, but not for our Raptors. Nurse is at the OVO Athletic Center attempting to get the men's national program a berth in the Olympics for the first time in almost 20 years. Basketball Canada appointed Nurse head coach of the team at the end of June. They're preparing for a two-game exhibition series against Nigeria in the city tomorrow. They'll head to China for the World Cup in September. The Toronto Blue Jays say they will extend the protective netting at the Rogers Centre next season. The team says it's designed to help keep fans safe. The Jays will also extend the netting at their spring training stadium in Dunedin. Other baseball teams have done the same after several injuries to fans from foul balls in recent years. In one incident last year, a 79-year-old woman died after being hit in the head by a ball at Dodger Stadium. Car seats are critical in protecting children in vehicles. Research shows the seats can reduce the risk of injury or death by 70%, but only if they are installed properly. And as Carolyn Ryan tells us, that is not always happening.
Oh, it's so snug.
Mohammed Suleiman loves his car seat. Getting strapped in, not so much. This poking and pulling isn't his cup of tea. It only takes a moment for Catherine Hookah to see the way he's positioned isn't quite right. Iman al-Assadi is Mohammed's mother. She's here to have his car seat inspected. The family is from Iraq, where adults simply hold their children in their arms in vehicles. Al-Assadi didn't know where to begin. The proper use of a car seat is something she never had to learn.
I look in the book, but because it's a language, it's hard to read in a book with the direction. But I was like looking on YouTube to figure out how I put the car seat in the car.
So we know that most families are buckling their children in some way, but we do know that there are a lot of errors or mistakes or just things that could make the seat safer.
Hookah uses a checklist to make sure all the details are just right. Over the years, she's seen it all. Straps cut, tied, twisted. Parents have put their children in car seats without actually attaching the seats to the vehicle.
We have heard from some emergency room physicians who have concerns about the way children are transported. They're really invested in injury prevention because they see the results of those injuries.
It's that concern that is driving a new study at Sick Kids Hospital. It'll look at how children are being transported to the emergency department. It was Hookah's job to train the researchers how to spot the errors.
So for me, I'm looking forward to seeing the results of this study so that we can find out what sort of decisions we need to make or policies or processes that we can put in place to better assist those families who might need help.
In the meantime, she encourages all parents to get their seats checked so babies like Mohammed can have a safe lift home. Carolyn Ray, CBC News, Halifax.
Oh, I like this one. Our photo today was sent in by Simply a Vanessa. Okay, have a great shot of Davis Feed and Farm Supply in Caledon. Lovely shot. All those flowers look beautiful. Remember, You can get your photos to us by posting them on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag CBC or GTA. We'll air some of them on the show.
That must be a professional photographer or a professional model.
Right? It was a great shot. We like that
adorable.
one. All right, so we've said that we are not done with the rain yet, not until we get closer to the weekend.
Kind of in waves, right? So it's not that it's constant all the time, but you've got to be prepared for it. So overnight tonight, a few isolated showers possible, especially towards the shoreline tomorrow morning, so early morning hours, think. 19 degrees, the overnight low. And then tomorrow, I think some clouds. Then we'll get into more of a mix of sun and clouds, so more sunshine as the day wears on. But also we get into some of that instability in the afternoon, so risk for some isolated showers or thunderstorms. 27, Dwight, but still feeling 30s.
No complaints.
We're not
going to
complaining
complain
either.
about the heat in the summer. That's it
Bring
for
it
our show
on.
tonight. Thank you for watching. News anytime on our website. Have a great night, everyone.